West Virginia has landed two transfers, a quarterback and an offensive lineman, who both have previous experience in the SEC conference, and the Mountaineers also have a 50% chance of landing one of the best pass rushers in the transfer portal. Let's talk about it. What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the Country Roads webcast for our January 14th transfer portal update. Been doing a lot of these as live streams. Wanted to cover this last night, but ended up getting home a little bit later from work than I expected, so bringing it to you in pre-recorded fashion here. But some really important updates, I think, here that we're going to talk about in the transfer portal here late as West Virginia, spring semester kicking off this week. A lot of guys coming in, but West Virginia trying to really hit some balls out of the park with some of these late additions here. Not only the ones that we're going to talk about that they've added, but the other one that they're in the mix for that we'll talk about here. But before we get to these transfer names, if you like transfer portal updates, staying up to date on the West Virginia roster, be sure you're subscribed here to the channel. We're always covering the transfer news here on the CRW, plus all kinds of roster news throughout the season as well. If you haven't yet, be sure to hit that thumbs up button on this video. Helps us a ton, helps us find more Mountaineer football fans like yourself, and we really appreciate you for doing those couple little things there. Just help us out here on the YouTube side of things. But let's talk about the two pickups for the Mountaineers, bringing in an offensive lineman, Tykees Crawford, from the SEC in Arkansas, and a quarterback from Charlotte, but previously was at Florida before that. A Florida Gator out of high school, was a top 40 quarterback in the country coming out of high school, so that's how he lands in the SEC. So two players with previous SEC experience, but also funny enough, Tykees Crawford played at Charlotte before Arkansas, so actually both of these guys have SEC experience and both of these guys have played at Charlotte, funny enough. But let's pull up our transfer portal tracker here. We'll add these names to our list, and I want to show you guys the full list before we talk a little bit about each of them individually. All right, so as you can see, the two we'll be discussing in this video, Tykees Crawford out of Arkansas, big offensive lineman, 6'5", 345 pounds. Played well before injury. I think injury kind of hurt, both of these guys a little bit in their early careers. But Tykees Crawford, a great addition to a West Virginia offensive line that we knew really needed pieces. We kept reeling in these transfer commits for a while, and for a bit there was an offensive lineman. Now West Virginia's added 4 in the past, few days or so, and also got Justin Terry back out of the portal, so you could maybe even say 5 into the mix, which is big because that's, more than doubled your scholarship offensive lineman that you had previously. And Tykees Crawford seems like a guy that's going to come in and compete right away. And then we have Max Brown out of Charlotte as well, joining into the fold. Like we said previously, recruited out of high school to Florida, so you're talented when you get that type of recruitment coming out. And he was, I think, a top 40 quarterback in the country. He's a dual threat guy. He can really run it, and got some interesting stuff to talk about with him momentarily. So those are the two additions. Of course, West Virginia now up to 28 names by my count on our transfer portal tracker here. I'll scroll up through slowly with, I think, 19 of those coming in the past 8 or 9 days or so. So really doing a phenomenal job in the transfer portal is this staff. You really got to tip your cap. But let's talk about some other ones that West Virginia may be after and do a little update here. As I told you guys on the, I think, most recent live stream that I didn't have the best feeling about Justice Finkley because West Virginia had landed Braden Siders. They had brought in Keenan Eck for a visit, and it turned out Justice Finkley committed to Kansas. But funny enough, not only did West Virginia add a great pass rusher already in Braden Siders up here, who we talked about recently, but they also, are in for Keenan Eck. They've sent him an offer, a JUCO pass rusher, but potentially probably the best edge player in the transfer portal, in my opinion, and maybe the best pass rusher, period, remaining in the transfer portal. He's one of those guys that, didn't expect to have another year of eligibility, but does with the new ruling, and he's looking to find a new home to play there, and he's going to have a lot of suitors, you thought, when he was in the portal. So didn't even really realize West Virginia was in the mix. West Virginia has done a good job on some of these guys of bringing them in on visits without you knowing about it. There's the ones that we've reported for a while, but they've snuck guys in. Jalen Henderson they snuck in, Braden Siders they snuck in, the linebacker Chase Wilson out of Colorado State was one I didn't know was visiting either. And so, they do a good job keeping certain names under wraps. And another one that they did was Jamori Robinson, but he has visited WVU. I believe he's going to be deciding tomorrow. And this is big, guys, because we're talking about he was the Defensive Player of the Year in the AAC conference. So a really talented guy. Some of his numbers there this past year: 17 TFLs, 10.5 sacks, 8 QB hurries, 2 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles. In one game, he was named National Defensive Player of the Week and AAC Defensive Player of the Week after they played Temple, because he broke the UTSA single game record, 5.5 TFLs in that game, and tied the school record for sacks with 4 in that game. So 10.5 sacks, an amazing pass rusher, won Defensive Player of the Year in the AAC conference there. So highly sought after, but West Virginia in the mix. And as I said in the opening, we have a 50% chance because he's believed to be deciding tomorrow, but he's already narrowed it down to a top 2. And of course, it has to be one of our rivals as the other one, Virginia Tech, but West Virginia with a 50% chance to land potentially the best pass rusher left in the portal. So we can't talk enough about the job this staff's doing. You get, a wide receiver that's put up more stats than, any wide receiver you had in the Neil Brown era. You never had a wide receiver in the Neil Brown era hit 800 yards. Cam Vaughn hit 800 yards in a Rich Rod offense last year as a redshirt freshman, had only been playing the position for a couple of seasons. You bring him in. You bring in one of the best cornerbacks in the transfer portal in Michael Coach Jr., was top 15 in the country in pretty much every countable stat and grade for cornerbacks last year. And then Jamori Robinson, one of the best pass rushers. If you bring him in, this transfer portal class is looking even better than it already does, and it's looking pretty good, especially with the other couple additions we want to talk about really quick. Tyke East Crawford and Max Brown, but wanted to update you guys on that so you guys can keep an eye on this one. Would be a big pickup for the Mountaineers. But let's talk a little bit about Tyke East Crawford and Max Brown, starting with Max Brown, because I got some interesting things to talk about with him. All right, so Max Brown, as I said, joining the Mountaineers as the quarterback out of Charlotte, started his career at Florida before transferring to Charlotte. Began the year as the starter there, had some injury issues, ended up, not finishing the year as a starter and didn't have the best numbers. I know when people look at their numbers, they maybe shake his head, but I'm sure his commitment video there on screen that he put out on social media. But he is very interesting to me personally because you guys know I have another channel where I do College Football 25 content, JCCFB, on YouTube. But one online dynasty I'm in, I've been playing with a group of guys that we've played together since, way back, about a decade ago. We played NCAA football 14 up until they finally brought back college football this past year. But nonetheless, in the online dynasty that we started when the new game came out back in July, it was one of those things where you start as kind of a lower tier school. So we all started as it was a 1-star program on there. So I was the head coach of Charlotte. And my team, Charlotte, the quarterback in my first 2 seasons, Max Brown. Funny enough, and what I can tell you from my experience on the game is the guy's fast and he's a great runner. I had a couple of good seasons with him, playing with him on the video game, which of course led me to do something that I did, of course, when we landed Jalen Henderson as well, but I wanted to do it on screen this time. I went to the College Football 25 video game because now that we know that these are kind of the 3 experienced QBs that'll probably be battling for the Mountaineers, I think that personally, Henderson and Marchio probably a little bit of a leg up on Max Brown, but you can't rule him out because especially when you look back at Jack State this past season, there was, some other quarterbacks that they thought would be the favorite, and a guy that not a lot of people were talking about that Rich Rod brought in from the FCS level, Tyler Huff, ended up being the guy that won the job there, ran for over 1,000 yards, threw for over 2,000 yards. So you never know. You can't count Max Brown out. He could factor into this because I think when you look at the ratings here on College Football 25, the thing that Max Brown and Jalen Henderson have over Nico, whereas Nico may be a better passer potentially, they have the speed at quarterback. They're a little bit better in the running game, which is important in a Rich Rod offense, so let's keep that in mind. But according to College Football 25, here's kind of the differences of these players. Max Brown, who we're just added and talking about here, he's a 75 overall with 82 speed, 83 agility, and 83 acceleration. He has 92 throw power. Jalen Henderson, the transfer we got from Texas A&M earlier in the cycle, he's a 78 overall, 85 speed, 84 agility, 86 acceleration, 92 throw power. And then, of course, Nico, 78 overall, 75 speed, 77 agility, 80 acceleration, and he is 93 throw power. So he does have the edge there in the throw power side. And, him and Jalen Henderson tied for the highest overall, according to the video game this past season. But that was just fun to kind of compare the 3 guys that are going to be battling for the Mountaineers now with the addition of Max Brown from Charlotte. But he wasn't the only addition yesterday. Let's talk for a second about Tyke East Crawford before we wrap up our January 14th transfer portal update here on the CRW. Tyke East Crawford, as you see here, sharing his commitment Yesterday on social media, there's the graphic that he shared, and he said, West Virginia Mountain Mama, take me home. Country Roads. Offensive lineman, like I said, big addition, literally 6'5", 345 pounds, I believe, or 324 pounds, excuse me. But still, huge size there coming in, and has experience. Started 9 games at Arkansas this past season. So, experience starting in the SEC, Power 4 conference experience. That's big. You got to think that he's probably going to factor into one of your starting positions on the offensive line, I would assume. We'll see what happens. But there was this commitment graphic. Let me pull up here from Keenan Cummings at Rivals. I'll talk a little bit about kind of what he did here in his career. Like I said, 6'5", 324. But the interesting thing about this one is he had committed to UCLA just about a week and a day ago, January 6th. He had committed to UCLA, so West Virginia flipping a transfer commitment. So West Virginia, we just can't say enough about the job they're doing here. Going out, getting big names already, and then even flipping guys late here in the cycle and getting, guys that can make impacts right away that were going to other power conference programs. He appeared in 33 games, made 6 starts. Excuse me, I think I said 9 there, but 6 starts with the Razorbacks. Prior to his time at Arkansas, he was at Charlotte, which I think is just funny that him and Max Brown committed on the same day when they have that connection, having both played in the SEC and both played in Charlotte. Played in 6 games for the 49ers. He took a visit too, so there's another one that kind of snuck in under the radar that I didn't know was visiting that West Virginia brought in. Obviously, I guess when you're trying to flip someone, you probably do want to keep that more under wraps if you're the Mountaineers, but they do a great job, and they give him to pledge. He was a former 4-star prospect and the number 25 rated tackle in the country, had offers from Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, and others. 1 year of eligibility remaining, which is what you can say about much of the additions West Virginia has added lately. So let's pull up that one more time just so you guys can get a final look here on the January 14th update. These are some names to watch that may commit to WVU that have visited. Offensive lineman William Reed just wrapped up his visit recently. That would be a big get on the offensive line as well. Jamori Robinson, we done talked about him, how big that would be. We'll look out for Keenan Eck and Adam Tomczyk as defensive linemen, and then Dallas Holmes, another tight end, has visited as well. And then, of course, the big, long transfer list with the recent additions of Tyke East Crawford and Max Brown, up to 28 names here by our count on our transfer portal tracker here on the Country Roads webcast. So great job by this coaching staff here building this 2025 roster. And that's my thoughts about it currently. I think that this is already a phenomenal class. If you add Jamori Robinson, you're talking about completely reshaping your defense into being one of the better defenses in the conference, maybe even, I think, just with some of the impactful additions you've made on that side. And not to mention the offense obviously is going to improve with Rich Rod in the helm, and he's added some really good players into the mix to join what West Virginia has returning there skill player-wise, the Jaden Brays, RG3s, Dom Collins, Jaheim Whites, and Nico Markiols of the world, joined by those transfers and some incoming freshmen as well, which if you want to know who enrolled early, hopefully you checked out our podcast episode I released yesterday where I talked about that a bit. Some freshmen coming in as well that could get in the mix, as West Virginia will have a lot of position battles going on. We'll be covering those and any other roster additions moving forward. Be sure to like the video before you head out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you can stay up to date on the offseason happenings here in Mountaineer football land. We'll be covering here on CRW. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.